Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School.
Oh, this week we're going to continue our Wong Kar-Wai Festival with his 2004 film, 2046.
Let's dive on in.
Let's do it.
All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Pulcher.
And if you like what you see /here, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places that people find good media. Yes, this is the third installment of our Wong Kar-Wai Festival.
Yes.
Neither one of us really knew much about this guy other than In the Mood for Love when we started this festival. And we were really interested to see where it would go.
Yeah.
I think that the most fascinating thing so far is that there's a sequel to In the Mood for Love.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Did you know that even going into this movie? Because
Nope.
I went into it blind as well.
Yep. And when I started to hear the same names and obviously the whole the theme about if you have a secret to tell.
About halfway through the movie, I was kind of like, oh, wait. The whole time it's been this?
Yeah.
Because, at the beginning, it is Tony Leung,
Yep.
a Wong Kar-Wai favorite.
Yes.
He's been in every movie, I think.
Yeah. All the ones we've watched.
So far. So obviously his muse to some degree.
But all of a sudden you're like, but his name is Chow.
Yeah. And, you see the title of 2046 and you think, okay, is this a year? Is this a room number? Like, what is this? But you assume it's a year just by the title, like, oh, this is maybe a movie about the future. And it is to a degree because he's a sci-fi writer and we get to kind of be inside of his book for a little bit of the movie.
We start inside of his book, which I think definitely makes you go, oh, it's a futuristic sci-fi movie.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. And so, but it really ends up just being his all of his loose affairs after he lost the love of his life.
Yeah, just trying to chip away at that thing, man, that I think that we all think about at that age of like, like how can I make this happen again? How do I get this back?
For sure. And also just going through all of that emotionally and not wanting that again and basically just being a ladies' man for the next 15 years.
Yeah.
In The Mood for Love, they skip around pretty especially between their relationship and everything like that. And yes, I started watching this thinking, okay, 2046. So the title of the film actually refers to the last year before the 50-year period the Chinese government promised to let Hong Kong remain as it is. Hong Kong returned to China in 1997.
That's right. It's also the name of the hotel room in The Mood for Love, where Chow and Sue would meet to work on the Kung Fu
I didn't put
book
that together.
That's why when he first sees it, he fixates on it. Because that was also the name of that. I did some research afterwards.
Okay, see, yeah, and obviously as more things were coming, I was like, okay, they basically talk about the secrets you want to keep. You put them in a wall and put mud on them. And I'm like, oh, maybe that's a Chinese thing, and it's something that he really believes in, and something that we're going to continue to see through the rest of his movies. But I'm like, they basically kind of explain the end of In the Mood for Love here. But I'm like, maybe that's just like a trope that he's doing. And then the music kind of starts being a little similar.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, similar style. I mean, it's very similar to In the Mood for Love. And then you see Ping, and you're like, wait, it's the same. Wait
a minute,
this is an extension of the movie. So that kind of blew my mind halfway through the movie.
Yeah. Same here.
It's more linear told than something like Chungking Express, probably. But what did you think of not only this being a sequel that you weren't expecting of one of our favorite movies?
Yeah.
How they executed it and kind of your overall like consensus of it. Did you like this? I wouldn't say I liked it more than In the Mood for Love, but I thought it was pretty damn good.
So I, as we talked about in the last review with Chungking Express, I didn't like Chungking Express nearly as much because not because of a linear thing, but just like the movie felt really disjointed of it being these two different stories. But I'm really glad I watched that before watching this because I think I was prepared for, as I did more research after watching 2046.
2046.
2046. I felt more prepared. That really one of the things that Wong Kar-Wai is known for is sort of like blowing up narrative, just destroying it, right? And saying that's not important because that's not how our minds work, you know? And reading through some interviews with him and understanding more about the way that he sees the importance of film being these moments, I went into 2046 really ready for that. And I love this movie. I absolutely loved it. I don't think that I loved it as much as In the Mood for Love, but it's a close second for me.
I agree.
In part because I love seeing movies. I'm such a sucker for movies that are a story about an artist who we get to go inside of their art and see how their art is affected by the things that are happening in their life.
Yeah.
I wrote with the exception of Welcome to Marwen. But for the most part, I usually love that when it's done really well. And I think it's done so well here.
Yeah.
I love the future.
Yeah, the dualities.
Well, and we always talk about how great science fiction is at being able to talk about these really hard to talk about issues in these completely different ways. And so like having this endless train where there's a room in the train called 2046 that when people go into it, people are always looking for it on the train because there's no loss there. And there's nothing ever changes and the room has no memory. And so when people go into it, they never leave because it's this perfect place. But then the very beginning, we meet this Japanese man, Tak, who has left. And it's like, why would you leave? Why would you leave this perfect place? And then that's sort of this pin that's put in at the very beginning before we even know that we're inside of a fictional story that the real story is wrapped around. I loved that. I love that this idea of the androids
definitely
that are all these different women in his life and that they have other functions that don't have anything to do with the sort of proxy version of him, right? And that he's falling over and over again in love with them and that they're like, that's not in my programming, or maybe I love somebody else, or maybe I'm breaking down and that he doesn't understand. And you go, what a great way to show how much that Chow, even though he's felt these feelings so deeply, he still doesn't understand women.
Yeah.
Right. And he still is like, he's constantly affected by them, but the process of getting to know them is useless to him because they might as well be robots. I was like, oh man, that's such a great thing to hinge so much of this story and sort of the heartstrings on. I just loved it. I thought it was so cool, man. It was a joy. The movie was a joy to watch.
So, This is the third film in an unofficial trilogy by him. Days of Being Wild from 1990 is the third one.
Neither one of us have seen.
Which we need to put on our list.
Definitely.
And In the Mood for Love is the second one, and then this being the third one. We talked about when we did In the Mood for Love that there was a bunch of stuff that they didn't use with the other people and other things here. So there's a 32-minute coda which was edited out before the theatrical release. And the deleted scenes take place 10 years later when the main characters meet again. So this is almost like a before sunrise, sunset thing a little bit. And the coda was screened at, I think it was Cannes. Yeah, it was at Cannes Film Festival once ever with this in it. And after they cut it out, they refilmed it, the coda, and shot and added it and made this sequel of that's what 2046 came out of those 30 minutes that they cut out.
Okay.
So
those
they took that, rewrote it, and extended it, and made 2046.
So much of those sequences that look, stylistically exactly the same were literally filmed during the same time.
I don't know if they were filmed, but the same style, all that stuff. Like, maybe they used some of the same footage. I'm not sure.
Well, because there are harken backs to this. I mean, I'm just thinking of like, there is again the classic tin covered street lamp with the rain on it. We see that again. That's very, it's probably not the exact same one, but it's like thematically, it's so similar to In the Mood for Love. But I think that this movie really stands on its own also if you haven't seen In the Mood for Love, because through the voiceover and things like that, like there are these like I don't know. This movie, the themes of this movie reminded me of so many other movies. One that's probably a really weird comparison, but there were things about this movie that reminded me a lot of High Fidelity. Through this whole sequence of Rob and High Fidelity going back to his old loves and then realizing how different things are, and like trying to sometimes recapture these feelings he had before, and realizing it's not going to be the same, or mistakes that he made he can never undo. There is a lot of that here too, of just sort of like, even though it wasn't so much old girlfriends, it was that the echo of Sue from In the Mood for Love is so strong in his heart that each new woman that he's meeting, he's comparing to elements from that not even a relationship, but from that experience with her.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and before I knew this was an In the Mood for Love thing, at the beginning, the girl that originally lives in 2046 gets stabbed like 2 days later after he sees her.
That's right.
And it was by some drummer in the club, and I'm just like, is he gonna turn into the drummer from the club and we just don't know it?
Right.
Or like something like that. Like,
it
so there's a lot of things
itself.
that I was, and so going into it a second time or third time or whatever, knowing it's, I'm sure I would catch even more similarities that may have missed. But some of these relationships are so cute, right? And some of them aren't gonna work, and it's just a fling, or one of them, or one of them is not into the other one as much as, there's always a balance, right? And I think they say it here is that so much of love is about timing.
Completely.
And that is a completely true statement, because there's multiple people, throughout your life that, if they didn't have a boyfriend or a girlfriend at that time, you could have hooked up or whatever, a million things.
Or if happened. I would have been in a different headspace, right? But instead I was in this different headspace. And I think that that's one of the things that's happening with Chow in this.
And that's what he's writing in his book, though, is these people trying to get to that place, 2046, right?
Yeah.
And it is a year, it is a room number, it is a place, it's all of these things. And I don't know if I've seen a title do quite as much as
where the symbolism dovetails over itself so many times. Well, and it's interesting too, if we think about the opening, or maybe it's not the very opening, but this movie also, much like In the Mood for Love, has these title cards that come up there that feel like these bits of poetry, just like In the Mood for Love. And one of them, interestingly, that is the beginning of his that is the beginning of his relationship with Bai Ling, who is played by the actress
Xia
from
Zhang,
amazing. She's so good.
She's always good.
From Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is probably the first place that people saw her.
Also, like Hero and Memoirs of Geisha. She's a well-known incredible Chinese actress.
Yeah. And but she is this kind of high class prostitute who moves into 2046, and they start off as drinking buddies, right? And then that quickly, obviously, exactly, quickly turns into a sexual relationship. But before that sequence starts, is this the title card says all memories are traces of tears.
Yeah.
But what I think is so interesting is the room 2046 in the sci-fi story is a room without loss, without sadness, and without memory, where nothing ever changes. So it's like this pinnacle that all the characters in his story are trying to reach to, like, is false in so many ways, because it's like that's not what makes love important. Like, what makes love important is the potential for loss, is the potential for harm and for tears and all these other things, right? And it's a really interesting concept to think about, that duality between those two, is that is the purpose of this room on the train. And at the same time, he as a character is just experiencing over and over either unrequited love or his own fuck ups from what could have been, right? Like that regret.
I mean, Wong Kar-Wai, I think himself is a poet, whether
definitely
no matter what his final intentions are, right? So I don't know. We go back and forth at a time, especially when it's Bai Ling and their relationship, which keeps dragging out and they keep teasing it. It's probably the longest one out of the four ladies that he kind of interacts with back and forth. And she does live across, and she's adorable, and
she wants him.
Yeah.
Like she at some point finally like drops the bomb of like, I haven't seen any other clients. I have no other clients. Like, I want you.
And this is the first movie that we've seen have any kind of sexual anything in it.
And it's pretty intense. Like, we sit with, I mean, it's not gratuitous.
No.
But it is definitely, they are like very, it's pretty erotic.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Sure.
It's like it's really well done,
but
sexually charged scenes between the two of them.
What I was getting at is that it's kind of like the end of that second act, and we really spend a lot of time with them, and we go away from the comic book part of the story, and part of me was questioning, like, wait, are we going to go back there? Or are they going to do a full switcheroo when we just spend the last hour inside the book or something?
With him, you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So I was kind of ready
knowing.
for anything, but they did go back, and it was a very balanced story compared to the rest of his movies.
Yeah, it was really, no, I totally agree with you. It was really balanced, even though we are telling several different stories. And it's like our second character, the landlord's daughter, Jing Wen, who's played by the girl with the really short hair from Chungking Express. I can't think of her the actress's name.
Her name is Fei Wong.
She's great. She's just
she's awesome. So she has this relationship with this Japanese boyfriend, and he kind of becomes the middleman in between them, so they can start sending letters, because her dad, the owner of the apartment, doesn't want him to be in touch with a Japanese man.
Well, and would you think like Chow does that for a pretty, I would say that his motives to begin with are in the right space. Like, I think he's just trying to be a nice guy.
Yeah.
And then he falls for her, man. And you can understand
they start
why.
writing together, just like he did with her. And, we haven't talked about it yet, but the cinematography here is ridiculous. Just as beautiful as In the Mood for Love. And he's still, even that beginning kind of blurry part in Chungking Express is in the sci-fi world, when you see the train going, right? You kind of see that like blurriness. But there's a scene with her in the restaurant, and it's this like glass transition, and it kind of just like slowly goes, like shows them both like fading in and out. I don't know how he did it. I watched it like 5 times, and I'm like, so is he like slowly fading across? Like, you couldn't tell exactly what it was, but it was one of the most beautiful shots I've ever seen. I was just like, how did you do that? It blew me away. But there's tons of amazing cinematography in them, but that one in particular really
even these
stuck out.
Futuristic moments, though, that are like the wide because most of it takes place on this train, but then in the futuristic scenes. But even these wide vistas that are obviously CGI, rather than doing what you would think, which is like a detailed matte painting or like a super detailed, which by this era would be probably kind of poorly aged CGI of what the city looks like. It looks like a moving watercolor painting of a futuristic city. Like, and I was like, man, that's tasteful.
Yeah.
Like, it still is in his style that the future is going to be these weird sort of smeary looking, and you can tell like, oh, it's some huge monolithic city, but it also looks like Wong Kar-Wai made it. So it's like, it is gauzy and sort of like abstract looking. And I thought that was so cool. And then everything in the train, the costumes, there were moments that almost felt like 2001 in the way that he framed up the inside of this futuristic train. And like, there's that big sort of futuristic looking gong that's in the middle that he keeps kind of pushing into, and sometimes there's characters in it and sometimes there's not. And I was like, boy, even to see that where everything's kind of chrome and futuristic looking, but even in those shots they look like Wong Kar-Wai, like he's
still doing the same things that he's doing. He's shooting through windows and doorways, and on mirrors as often as possible. Even in the future, we have that clunky frames like you're talking about.
Yeah.
All through this movie, just like those other ones.
Yeah, or you know, a whole shot of a big long hallway in the train, and our two characters are crowded over into one corner of it, having this intense discussion, but they're just in the corner of our screen, you know, and you're just like, I love that, man. Like, even because so I think for something like In the Mood for Love, there's a feeling, there's a coziness to the 1950s feel of it, of like these old wooden desks and these green glass windows and all this kind of stuff. So to see that then transposed into this future world and be like, oh, it's not the 1950s aesthetic at all. It's just him.
Yeah.
It's just the way that he sees the shot when he looks through the camera. Like, yeah, like, I loved this movie because I was like, oh man, like even in these completely different realities, all this stuff still feels so classic and iconic.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, the only thing it's missing is that song, you know?
It's true, man.
Like, if they had that one song where they had those bridges to different transitions and stuff like that, like, that would... But then you're just ripping off that. This is more about that future sci-fi, kind of that veil of sci-fi, right?
Yeah.
But I do love that this movie doesn't just rely on sex and the glam of a loving relationship. I think it really reflects on the repercussions of that too. And I don't know, that's not an easy thing to write about and have it feel real.
Well, there's this other thing that's happening, and this is another, not the whole movie, obviously, but there was a feeling I got from so many scenes in this movie that reminded me of, do you remember in Groundhog Day when Bill Murray has the really, like, they almost kiss moment snowball fight with why can't I think of her? Andy McDowell.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, it's this great, like, oh, they kind of like each other moment. And then it shows it again later where he tries to force it and he's throwing snowballs at her and it just, and she's like, what the fuck's wrong with you? And it's like, it plays poorly the second time. And he's like, what's wrong? Right. There were so many moments in 2046 that made me feel like that scene where it's like, he's trying so hard to relive the romance that he had from In the Mood for Love with these other women, and it's all, none of it fits right, you know, and like you can see him realizing in the moment, like, yep, also not this.
I mean, I
like,
can see why you said High Fidelity now after you say that.
Just think about when
it's not one I thought of, but I can see
when he comes back to Bai Ling.
Yeah.
And looks tired, and she's gone back to working with clients.
Yeah,
and
she's a doctor or something. Yeah.
And he's just like, it's not going to work. Like when he came back to see her, like, and I don't know what they did because she still looks great, and it's not like they'd made her hair all mussy and her clothes, like she still looks as well put together as earlier. But man, that light's gone from her eyes, right? And she just. And it reminded me of the High Fidelity scene where he's like, you know, I could have had sex back there, but, you know, it's just not the same, you know? And you're like, yeah, he has to. So like in that moment, he realizes it was a mistake to see you again, right? Like he thought, well, she loves me, right? So I'll go see Bai Ling again. And then he does. And he's like, this was a really bad idea. And he leaves her crying on her doorstep. And it's a super heartbreaking scene, but you're just like, yeah, he's trying to relive this moment, these feelings he had. And so it's like, he is a ladies' man and he's successful in the sense that he's a ladies' man, but he's also like, he's also
kind of, I mean, he's a famous author at a point in this movie, right? And so there's some fame there. He gets a little bit of cash and flings it around. Like there's stuff like that as a writer and, you know, someone that probably lives a pretty minimal life, you know.
But even when he's talking about it, he doesn't seem stoked about it. He seems kind of like, so that happened, and I got really good at being that character.
My favorite part is that everyone tells him the end of his book is too sad. He's like, I want a happy ending too. I was like, yeah, I know. That's just how it went, though.
Well, and that gets to this. I love this. When he finds out that the landlord's daughter is marrying the Japanese guy.
Yeah.
And the dad says, you know, she wants you to write a happier ending. And he goes in and sits, and there's that pen that's sitting like a half inch off the paper, and it says 1 hour later,
100 hours,
10 hours later, 100 hours later.
1,000.
And then we get a a mirror of that,
Yep.
of the one android version of the landlord's daughter looking out the window of the train, and it does the same thing, but it's like 10,000 hours. It's like, and those like little breaks in that, I just thought, man, it was so cool. And
he is a stellar filmmaker, though.
it's well, and again,
Excellent.
like I was saying, this dovetailing of the two stories and how they mirror each other. And I'll just say, if I had $1 for every time that I was told don't fall in love with the robot hostesses, right? And he's like, somebody falls in love with them, and I was like, oh, buddy, I have a feeling you're in for a rough time with this. And it's great though, because they are these sort of proxy versions of the women that he meets, who all have their own storylines that don't involve him, and that he's just floating.
Yep.
I don't know if you ever heard there's the Okkervil Rivers song, A Girl in Port, where he talks about that, where he's just like, he's basically like, through the song, he's like, you can sleep with me because I don't know how to break anybody's hearts. He's like, I'm empty, cold, and clear, so pour yourself into me. Yeah. That's the lyric. And I just was like, that's Chow in this movie, is that
Great song.
He's this kind of empty vessel, and he's just moving through the lives of all these people that are off to other things that don't have to do with him.
I definitely want to put The Day of to Nowhere, I think is what it's called. Let me zoom back up here and see. Days of Being Wild. So I wasn't even close. Days of Being Wild. I'm going to put that on my list.
I need to know now. Yeah, totally.
Especially if it's the future. So, that is the third installment. We're going to get into the fourth installment, The Grand Master, in a couple of weeks. Next week, we are going to do that one scene from Meet Joe Black.
Holy shit.
I can't wait.
Cannot wait.
But yes, this has been a fascinating festival so far. So please like and subscribe, play along, like us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, comment, do all the things. Instagram, TikTok are the most active channels. So feel free to join us on this journey, and we will see you next week.
Bye, you guys.
Thanks.